Okay, we've reached part two of our elements of handicapping the Kentucky Derby, and that is class. And it's an assessment of whether or not each contender rightly belongs in the Kentucky Derby from a competitive standpoint. An analysis of pedigree and family history in conjunction with track results will help determine their qualification for our usage. And what we're going to evaluate on is, of course, pedigree, prior race form. So that's in conjunction with form to a degree, the level of competition they've been running at, and then the possibility of progression or regression in the Kentucky Derby. The class rating system is very similar to what we used for form. Average would be 0, where they, pretty much they belong in the class of Kentucky Derby runners. Above average, maybe they're a little better, and then 2 plus 2 would be, of course, superior. And this would apply to the races they ran in as well. And we'll get into that in a second. And of course, -1 is below average, and -2 is outclassed, and that will have to do with race performance as well as just general class. So one of the things we're going to look at is pedigree, and you've heard me talk about in the individual postings about GSV, or genetic strength value. And just as a frame of reference, I've taken all the genetic strength values for all the competitors and I've rated them from best to worst. And so you can see Anna Marie is the leader with a 61.97, followed by Resilience. Grandmo the First was a bit of a surprise, endlessly. And then, of course, down at the bottom, you've got a little surprisingly, Just a Touch, Mystic Dan, and Fierceness. Now, this shouldn't give us too much of an alarm, because to review about genetic strength value, and I don't want to go too deep into this, but it does have to do with the amount of chefs de race influence in the pedigree, and they don't keep track of the chefs de race any longer. So these numbers are not quite as accurate as they used to be. I simply put this in here as a means of comparing one to the other. Now, horses who are freshman sires or very young sires are going to have a lower GSV, and because they don't have a lot of stakes winners. The points are determined by how many stakes winners they have at particular levels of racing. So sprints, speed, mile, classic, and longer type of thing. So it has to. So anyway, this is one of the things to take a look at, and all it really just says is that Anna Marie has a very strong pedigree, and it doesn't mean necessarily that a horse has a weak pedigree per se, but it just denotes that it might be a little stronger than perhaps some of the others. So this is one of the things we'll look at, and you have it for your reference to take a look at. We even threw an Epic Ride and also eligible, because we still don't know if Endlessly is going to run or not. So then we're going to go to the average winning distances. I think this is important, and this can speak to whether or not a horse is going to, in the Derby, is going to get the distance of 1.25 miles. Generally, I've found over the years that a horse with over 7 is a pretty good bet that he'll get the Derby. The sire, obviously, the dam with a longer average winning distance, the more likely it is. If you take, for instance, Just Steel, who Justify still is a little questionable at past 1 1/8. Look at the dam, is 9.2 furlongs average winning distance. So there's tons of stamina underneath, and that may make up for the limitation that perhaps the sire can provide. If you look on at T.O. Password, he's totally bred for classic distances, 7.5 from the sire and 8.8 with the dam. You do find a lot of dams, the average winning distance is going to be considerably longer than the sire, because as I've mentioned before, that's where the class comes from, and carrying your speed longer. And most of the time they always think they can breed stamina to a horse. So if the sire is a little short, distance-wise, the dam can make up for it, and that's why quite often you see these dams with a greater average winning distance. So this is another category to give us a pretty good idea of what horses are going to be okay at the distance. I would also make a note, any of these horses who have younger sires who've only had a couple of crops, their average winning distance is going to be a little lower, and it doesn't necessarily mean that that they won't get 1.25 miles. It just means that they haven't had enough horses run at 2-turn races to pump up the average winning distance to where it probably ought to be. So you get somebody like maybe Constitution, who's only been a sire for a couple of years. Just off the top of my head, his average winning distance maybe hasn't reached its maturity yet. So just a little thing to think about. So if you do see an average winning distance that's a little short and the sire is young, don't worry about it too much. Think about the way they ran when they were racing, and that might give you a pretty good idea of how they do. So pedigree rankings, this is, again, we're using the +2 to -2 system, and just in my assessment of them, the top pedigrees have a +2, and that would be Anna Marie, Resilience, Sierra Leone, Catching Freedom, Epic Ride. If he draws in T.O. Password, Dornoch, Society Man, those are the ones with the top pedigrees. And then you have your +1s just a little bit below that: Encino, Endlessly, Catalytic, Forever Young, Just Steel, and Just a Touch. And then we have the average ones: Grandmo the First, Fierceness, and West Saratoga. And then your negative ones are pretty much horses I think either are going to be challenged by the distance or are not going to get it. And I think Domestic Product, being by Practical Joke, we all remember Practical Move last year and how we had the big question mark of whether he could get 1.25 miles. Sadly, we never found out, but it's a pretty good bet that Domestic Product's going to have a lot of trouble at the distance. Mystic Dan, being by Golden Sense, I still think that's going to be a bit of a challenge for him as well. So the ones with a negative score are ones that you might be able to toss just on pedigree. So then the next thing we have to do is we have to rank the Derby prep races. And I've assigned them a value using our plus and minus system. And the top Derby prep, in my view, was the Risen Star. So any horse who ran in the Risen Star gets a +2 to their class rating because they ran in one of the most competitive races. And conversely, you look at the Sunland Derby, the Fountain of Youth, and even the Fakuriu Stakes that T.O. Password ran in, they get a -2 because they weren't very good races. Now, you're still going to get, as you'll see, a horse will still get credit if he ran a great race, even if the field was bad. If you take maybe the Florida Derby was a 0, but a Fierceness still gets a +2 because he ran a really good race. Whereas if you go to, say, the Tampa Bay Derby, Domestic Product won it, but it was he gets a -2 because it was a bad field. And I believe I only gave him a 0 because, again, the field wasn't very good. It was a very strangely run race. So for our purposes, all 24 Derby preps, we have to rank them. And this is how we've done it to arrive at a class rating for each individual horse. And I hope that's clear. It should be from the form segment. So now we'll look at them individually. Fierceness, of course, we know the mercurial good race, bad race nature, and that's reflected in his class evaluation. So you see, he gets a 0 for pedigree based upon our ratings. He gets a +2 for the Florida Derby, but it wasn't the greatest of fields, so that race is a 0. And frankly, if he hadn't been in it, it probably would have been a -1 or a -2. But it gets upgraded a little bit because of Fierceness, and Catalytic ran a good race too. The Holy Bull was a subpar race. Hades winning it. Slow fractions, not a great field. It's turned out to be not a great field. And Fierceness ran poorly in it, so he gets a -1. So his total is 0. That's his class rating. And it's kind of reflective of the fact that he's good race, bad race, and he can be brilliant. He also can be mediocre. So what's that in between? Average. So that's a 0. Hope that explains it. So next we'll come to Sierra Leone. And we'll see pedigree, he gets a +2. He's regally bred by Gunrunner. Excellent pedigree for the Derby. He ran in the 2 best Derby preps, the Bluegrass and the Risen Star. So he gets +2 for each. Then I thought the Risen Star was a better run race for him than the Bluegrass. So he gets a +2 for the Risen Star. He gets a +1 for the Bluegrass. Then we have the added category of progression. And what this is sort of a way to skew a little bit based upon whether or not we think the horse is ready to take another move forward and run a big race. Because, of course, if they're improving, their class level can increase. I think Sierra Leone is sitting on a big one, so I am giving him a +2 for progression. He's coming in third off the layoff. Chad Brown's been planning for this. So his overall score, adding all of that together, is a +11. So now we come to Catching Freedom, and he has 3 preps. But it shouldn't matter terribly much with the arithmetic here because of the plus and minuses, but it is something that may be taken into consideration. So a horse with a higher score with 2 preps as opposed to 3, maybe you give a little something to. It's up to you. But you see, pedigree-wise, he's a +2. Louisiana Derby was one of the better Derby preps, and he ran a brilliant race, so he gets a +2 for that. The Risen Star was a +2. He ran a good race, but it was skewed by his greenness, so he gets a +1. Smarty Jones wasn't a bad race, but he won it, but he was kind of green, so he gets a 0. And progression, the only thing that he would get a +2, except for the fact this is his 4th race this year. And sometimes that's the start of a new form cycle. It's a little thing, but so he gets a +1, but I still think this horse is in very good form and should run a really nice race. So his total is +11. He did it with 3 preps. Sierra Leone did it with 2. We come to Honor Marie, and as I've mentioned before, this one is in excellent form and is, I think, third off the layoff, is ready to run a big race. So we look a +2 for pedigree, honor code, outstanding sire. Louisiana Derby, one of the better preps, +2 for the race, +2 for a really nice performance. I thought was equally as good as Catching Freedom. The Risen Star, another, the best Derby prep, didn't run terribly well, but was okay at the end of it. So I'm not going to give a -2, but that was a -1 effort. It was inconsequential. And then progression, I really think Honor Marie is sitting on a big race and is going to be awful dangerous. So again, we add them up, you get +9. Forever Young is our Japanese import. Now this one is very, very interesting because, of course, we're not overly certain who he ran against, and that's really the big thing. So class is going to reflect that. Pedigree-wise, he's got an excellent pedigree for 2 turns. We're not worried about that. He gets a +2. The Saudi Derby, I didn't think was much of a field, and it was a 1-mile race, so it gets a -1. But Forever Young, he didn't break terribly well, but he did rally, and he gets a +1, so he obviously ran an above-average effort to get up for the win. UAE Derby, I thought he ran a much more professional race. He looked a lot more comfortable. He changed leads well, and he closed into what was a speed-favoring track and a horse alone on the lead on the rail, and he was able to run him down. So I thought that was an outstanding effort. He gets a +2. Progression is +1, mainly because of the travel and the acclimation to the U.S. track. We're not certain that he's done that yet. Just had to work the other day. Was a minute 19 for 6 furlongs, I believe, but not to be alarmed. They started him off walking very slow and picked up things as he went late. In that last quarter, I think he went 23 and change. So it was a solid work, and we're not going to worry about that. So class is a really big issue with Forever Young, and because there's some unknowns with it, obviously, while I think he's an excellent horse and could very well be a prime Derby candidate, a +5 is class rating because of racing abroad. So now we come to Stronghold, and he's another one with big class issues. Pedigree doesn't really scream a 1.25 miles, so he gets a -1. The Sanity Derby I didn't think was much of a race. It was pretty much a 2-horse race all the way around the track, so he gets a -1. The race does, but he gets a +1 because he did have an extended duel with Imagination, and I think it showed a lot of grit, and this horse has been consistently good, and he does like to fight, and you have to like that. Sunland Derby gets a -2. That's a bunch of local horses who none of them really amount to much. Lucky Jeremy has come east and didn't do terribly well. He gets a 0 for that because he really didn't beat anything. So progression-wise, I think Stronghold's going to run a good race. I just don't know if it's good enough. I'm just not sure he's fast enough. That's really the big issue with him. But we'll talk about that in speed. So we add up our numbers, and he gets a -2, and that's indicative of a horse who really hasn't run against much. And while he has won, didn't do so in such an impressive fashion to tell you that he was way above their class. So that should be, I hope that makes sense, and I think that's indicative of stronghold. Resilience is another one that is very interesting. Seems to be getting it at the right time and is on an upward arc. We look at the pedigree. He's got outstanding pedigree for 2 turns. He's a 2-turn horse all the way. The Wood Memorial, I'm giving it a +1 because I think it represented maybe a breakout race for Resilience to a degree. If those who maybe want to give it a 0, I wouldn't blame you there. But I think it was a little better than that. And he gets a +1 because he ran an impressive race. He did win, but he didn't totally blow them away. And Society Man was getting to him late. He was clearly in command of the race, but again, it wasn't one of the better Derby preps, so he gets a +1. Risen Star was an excellent race, but he ran a good race, not a great one. He finished an okay 4th. He was up near the pace, which was soft, and I would have liked to have seen him linger a little longer, but it was his first stakes effort, so he gets a 0 for that. Progression-wise, I think Resilience can move forward into the Derby. I'm a little worried that he's not quite fast enough. I think he'd have to take a very big leap. So he gets 1 for progression. So you add him up, there's no negatives in there. He gets a +7. So now we look at Dornoch, and this is where you're going to see the negatives here. He's got excellent pedigree, of course. He's a full brother to Mage. Puka's an outstanding dam. Big Brown almost won the Triple Crown. Still don't know why he didn't. And you see, he was in the Bluegrass Stakes, one of the better races, but he raced terribly. So he gets a -2. The 2 cancel each other out. And the Fountain of Youth was one of the worst Derby preps of the year. So that gets a -2. And then he won it, but he didn't look like we expected him to overpower that field, and he didn't. And he still looked kind of green in doing so. So he gets a -1. Progression, I think this horse can run better once they just decide to put him on the lead. And there are a lot of things to point to him having a better race, but I'm not giving him a +2. It's only a +1 because he is still very green and he does a lot of things that you would have thought a 3-year-old going into the Kentucky Derby would not be doing by now. So he gets a 0. Everything sort of, his good cancels out his bad and vice versa, and that's why you end up with a 0. Track Phantom is basically done the same thing with each. His pedigree is not really attuned to a 1.25 miles, I don't think, particularly with Jimmy Creed and Sprinter pedigree on the bottom, on the dam side. The Louisiana Derby was an excellent race, and that was the first chink in the armor, really, I thought, where perhaps it indicated the distances were getting long. So he wilted in that one, despite having every chance to win it. So he gets a -1. Risen Star, I don't think he did anything wrong. It was an excellent race. He got run down by Sierra Leone, but he did his job. He ran the race that he runs, so he gets a 0. Same thing with the LeCompte, but I didn't think that was nearly as good a field. It hasn't turned out to be much. Nash has gotten a little better, but at the time, that really wasn't much of a field. So he did his job. He went gate to wire. He gets a 0. Progression, I don't like his chances in the Derby at all. Mainly stems from the pedigree and the fact that he will not have it easy on the front end. And I think those two things really compromise his chances. So he gets a -2 for progression because I think he's ready to. I think the distances and the class is probably going to be too much for him. So he gets a class rating of -1. Now we come to Just a Touch, who's a very interesting horse. His pedigree is solid for the Derby, although I would justify, again, I know some of you disagree, and that's okay. Maybe past a 1.125 might be pushing it. The Bluegrass Stakes, he ran an excellent race, but I do wonder about that in the stretch. He looked like he stopped running until Sierra Leone came to him. I worry about that a little bit, but other than that, I thought he ran an excellent race, attending a pretty hot pace and still having enough to get second. The Gotham, that really wasn't much of a field. I think actually giving that a 0 is kind. It probably ought to be a -1. And he got an okay second, but he was really no threat to win. And so it was an average race. Progression, aside from the fact I have a little bit of concern about the distance, I think this horse can move forward, and he's very interesting in a lot of ways. So you add them all up, no negatives, he gets a +5. So we come to Just Steel, and this one's run quite a bit. We've got 3 preps, and you see the pedigree again. He does have plenty of stamina underneath with the dam, but I have some questions about Justified. So he gets a +1. Ran a really nice race in the Arkansas Derby, but wasn't able to close the deal and wasn't able to get to Muth. So he gets an above average rating, a +1. Rebel Stakes, he certainly had a wide trip, and I think he was compromised. That race really hasn't turned out to be much now that we've seen Timberlake become mortal. So he gets a -1 because he just wasn't able to overcome the outside post. And while it is understandable, you would have liked to think he would have been able to do a little better than that. The Southwest Stakes I thought was a pretty good race, and but for Mystic Dan freaking, he wins it. I thought he ran an above average race there, so +1 on both. Justin, I think, can potentially progress. After the Arkansas Derby, he seemed to put it all together in a way that was that I liked how he ran that race more so than I have his other preps. And so it is possible for him to take another step forward, though, again, I'm not overly certain the 1.25 miles is going to be up his alley, and I'm not sure he's fast enough, but I think he can move forward potentially, so he gets a +1 for a total of +6. Excuse me. So now we come to West Saratoga. And this one has had a pretty checkered Derby trail, I think you'd have to say. Pedigree looks like to me about average, nothing special about it. The Jeff Ruby Stakes was an okay race, and he ran one of his better efforts, +1. Probably, I think if he was a little better, he would have won it. He would have been able to win it, let's say. But he ran a pretty good race, so he gets above average +1. Sam F. Davis has turned out to be not really much of a race, and he was kind of a distant third, and he really wasn't any threat to win it. So he kind of gets, he gets a -1 for that one because it just wasn't that great a race. Progression, based upon the Jeff Ruby, it looks like he's going to take a move forward. I just don't think he's fast enough. So he does get a +1. That brings him to 0, but I think this horse likes to compete, and I think at big odds you could think about him underneath for the Super, but that's the extent of it, and he just isn't fast enough to win this year's Derby. So now we come to Domestic Product, and his pedigree, he's by practical joke. That's a -2 because I don't think a 1.25 miles is what this horse wants. Secondly, the 2 preps he's running were 2 of the worst on the trail. The Tampa Bay Derby was just so god-awful slow. And, he won it. But, I mean, that's just a ridiculously run race. And I don't think it told us anything about him, especially since the Holy Bull was slow. And he factored in that race. So I really don't think we learned a whole lot. And I get when they start taking a horse further back, the longer the distances go, that tells me that pedigree is a real issue and stamina is a problem. And I think that's a big problem for Domestic Product. So I don't think he's going to move forward in the Derby. I think he's going to he has a very good chance of finishing last. I think they're going to send him, is my personal thought, but I know some of you disagree with that. But what else would they do? He's rank already a lot of the times. Might as well just let him go and set it up for Sierra Leone. So you add it all up, no positives at all. He gets a -7. So he, to me, is probably the worst horse in the Derby, except for maybe T.O. Password. So now we look at Mystic Dan, and he's had a checkered Derby trail as well. You see pedigree, I by Golden Sense, that's a -2 to me. I just do not think this horse wants a 1.25 miles. You see, the Arkansas Derby was an above-average race, and he didn't run. He ran an okay third, but he was no factor whatsoever. So I'll call that average, and I think that's a little kind. It probably ought to be -1, given the speed and what we saw from him in the Southwest. Southwest Stakes was an above-average race, I thought, and he ran bonkers. But we put the asterisk there because of the mud, but he does get a +2. Smarty Jones was he didn't run well at all. I thought he just didn't run well. Now, I've heard that Kenny McPeak has been trying to teach him how to rate, and maybe we can give him a little bit of an excuse for that. But, to me, on talent alone, he should have been able to stay in that race, and he just didn't factor in it at all. Again, I don't think the 1.25 miles is what this horse wants. And there may be reasons that he can run better than he did in the Arkansas Derby. Maybe we'll cover those later on. But to me, I just don't see him being a factor in this race. He has speed, but he can't carry it at the Derby distance. So he ends up, after all that, with a 0. So now we come to Society Man, who's just seems to be on the improve. The light bulb seems to have gone off. He's got Derby pedigree. And this is the thing. This is the kind of horse that you really want to pay attention to in the Derby, because they don't have to win to make you money, because he's going to go off at big odds again, and he may keep running when some others are backing up. And so this is one you want to pay attention to. The Wood Memorial, he was closer to the pace. It showed me that he's starting to get it, and he's improving, and he gets a +1 for a pretty good second at 106-1. The Withers was awful, and it was not a good Derby prep at all, I didn't think, and he ran awful in it. So -2 both times. Progression-wise, I think this one can run another good race in a row. I don't think it'll be fast enough, but again, all he has to do is keep running at big odds and get into the bottom of your super to pay you. So he gets a +1, mainly because of his pedigree, and I think he is on the way. He is improving. So that added point for progression puts him in the positive. But he's a horse that, again, he has one limited usage in the Derby. Now we come to Encino. This is a horse I really like. His pedigree is a little bit above average, so he gets a +1. The Lexington was a little bit above average. It wasn't one of the better preps. It wasn't a bad one either. And I thought he ran very well, and showing the different tactic of going on the lead to take advantage of the speed bias. He gets a +1. It's not a +2, mainly because of the field in general, but I thought it was a very solid effort. If you want to upgrade it to a +2, I wouldn't blame you. The Battaglia, I thought, was probably a better race because he ran down Epic Ride, who was a really solid on synthetic at Turfway, and he just displayed an above-average effort. If the field had been a little deeper, I could upgrade that to a +2 as well. And then progression, I think this horse is really ready to pop, and I think he's sitting on a big one. So no negatives at all for me. So class-wise, Encino gets a +7. Now, Grandmo the First has been in Florida the whole time, and he's got a couple of thirds in 2 of the worst preps on the Derby trail. Florida Derby is a 0. It would be a -1 or 2, but for fierceness being in the race. He got a third. It was a non-factor third. He gets a -1. His pedigree is very average. I don't see anything that tells me it would be really that special for the Derby, and especially being by Uncle Mo. I know Uncle Mo has Nyquist as a Derby winner, but Uncle Mo didn't want more than 1 1/8 miles, and I don't know. It's not a guarantee that he's going to get the distance. Tampa Bay Derby was just a ridiculously run race. He gets a -2 just for being in it, and okay, he was up in the money, but it was a lousy race, so he gets no credit for that. He gets an average of 0. So progression, I don't think this horse belongs. I think he's totally outclassed. The fact that he couldn't win one of the Derby preps he entered, which were not some of the better ones, or even factor significantly, he gets a -2 because I think he's ready to drop. So he has one of the lower class ratings at -5. Catalytic, we've only got one race to deal with, and that's the Florida Derby. He ran a hell of a good race. His pedigree is pretty good for the Derby. he's only got one Derby prep, and he ran really, really big in that race. And it's hard to believe that moving into now a 20-horse field at a mile and a quarter with all the other distractions in his that he's going to be able to duplicate that and take another step forward. I think he's ready to bounce. He just ran too big in the Florida Derby, so he gets a -2 because I think he's not going to progress. So he ends up with a 0. T.O. Password, we've got one race to think about, and I didn't think it was a very good field at all. He has excellent Derby pedigree. There's no question he's going to get the mile and a quarter. I just don't think he's fast enough. I'm giving him a -1 because but for the fact that he didn't have anybody pressing him on the lead, he was begging for the wire, and he barely won that race. And it just didn't look very good to me, not very promising. I don't think he's going to factor in this race at all. And I don't even think he can hang around. I think there's too many other better horses. So he gets a -2 for a total of -3. Now we come to Endlessly. And incidentally, I will have individual postings on Endlessly as well as Epic Ride. I know some of you have asked about it. My main reason being, of course, was that we didn't know if Endlessly is going to run, and he is a turf horse. So, but we will go back, and I've already done some preliminaries, and you'll have an individual posting to take a look at him. But for now, well, look, his pedigree is fine for 2 turns. I don't think that's an issue. Oscar Performance has plenty of horses who have run just fine on dirt. Most notably, off the top of my head, Red Carpet Ready. So I don't think it's going to be that much of a problem for him to go to dirt. The one Derby prep, of course, is on the synthetic with the Jeff Ruby Stakes. And I thought, it was an average race given the field. And he ran a very good race, but he didn't beat much. And it was on synthetic, so for that, he gets a +1. This is a really nice horse. I don't want to get you to think otherwise, but trying dirt for the first time at a mile and a quarter where he hasn't shown speed figures to be comparable with the best, gets a -2. Because I think, he'll probably try like hell and try real hard, but I don't know. I don't see it. So I'm giving him -2, and so he ends up with a 0. And finally, we have Epic Ride, who is on the also eligible list, but has been competitive, and he's an interesting horse. He ran a really nice bluegrass. You see, he's got great pedigree. He gets a +2. I don't think the distance will be an issue. In the bluegrass stakes, it was a premium race, and he ran huge. He really ran a big race, but I would have liked if he was to be a little more of a factor late, maybe get up for second. And so I give him a 0 for that, maybe a +1. I could see if you want to give it to him. I could see it. The Battaglia, I thought he ran great. He just got run down by Encino. I thought the race was a little bit above average because you did have the two of them, Encino and Epic Ride, in it. And I thought he ran a really good race. He just got beat. That's by Encino. That's all there is to it. Progression, I'm just not sure. This is a really nice horse. He's never been out of the money. I think a mile and a quarter he can get. I'm just not sure he's fast enough. That's really the big issue. He tries real hard, but so I think it's maybe the bottom of the super because he is a competitor and hopefully at the right value. So his total is +6. So we take a look, and this is the overall class rankings, and you'll see Sierra Leone and Catching Freedom are leading. That shouldn't be a surprise. They ran in the better Derby preps, and they won, and they ran really well. So Anna Marie very close behind with a +9, Encino, Resilience, and you see then once you get after Just a Touch, it starts to drop off. Now, to me, that's a good thing because now we've got... And to me, from Society Man all the way down to Domestic Product, these are all fence horses. And, you can pick and choose from them. I would to me, I'll probably pick 1 or 2 zeros out of this to use. I would not use any horse with a negative number. Maybe, Stronghold, maybe, but I just don't think he's fast enough. That's the big issue for me. So, the numeric values are higher. That's true. But there's other things to consider. And the idea being was to show a higher class rating for horses who have run in better races. And then to penalize horses who didn't perform well in the more mediocre races. And so, obviously, from that perspective, the numbers are going to be higher and than they were for form. So I hope that all makes sense. I hope this clears things up a little bit. I think this is a pretty good way to quantify the horses, and numerically, this pretty much came out the way I expected it to. So from that perspective, I think it worked out as a pretty good system. Let me know if you have other ideas. I'm certainly willing to listen, and maybe we'll make some adjustments when we get towards the final assessment. But I hope this was helpful. Be on the lookout for speed and pace, and then our final assessment. And also, I'm going to have 2 individual postings, one for Epic Ride as well as Endlessly, and hopefully that will help you all as well.